The flag was smaller than the crosses, folded twice, hidden beneath wet flowers. April 1945. Trier, Germany. James Walker carried fresh marker boards across the cemetery road. James Walker, Cleveland, age 31. He'd been a graves registration clerk for 19 months. He'd seen burned tanks, frozen bodies, broken dog tags, but he'd never seen this. Rain sat inside the boot prints. The cemetery held 12 American graves. White crosses, mud between them, fresh soil still loose around the edges. The flowers did not belong there. Someone had placed them carefully beside the center row. 3 red carnations, 1 cracked glass jar, a small German flag folded beneath the stems. Walker crouched beside cross number 7. The cloth stayed dry under the flowers. He unfolded one corner. Black, white, red. Nobody spoke. An MP stepped closer. Another looked toward the village road. The graves sat less than 400 yards from the civilian district. Third Army trucks still moved through Trier every hour. 2 sniper incidents had already been reported that week. Walker folded the flag again. He placed it back exactly where he found it. A child stood near the cemetery fence. Brown coat, no hat, mud on both shoes. She did not move when the MPs looked at her. The rain kept falling. This is what Patton said. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the stories about World War II that survived only in temporary cemetery records and forgotten occupation reports. The cemetery had not existed 9 days earlier. Third Army engineers marked the ground after fighting near the Moselle crossings left more than 200 American dead waiting for transport west. The larger burial sites were still overloaded. Trucks moved bodies every night. Graves registration teams worked beside artillery roads and collapsed bridges. The temporary site outside Trier held only 12 crosses because the others had already been moved. Those 12 remained for one reason: identification problems. 2 soldiers carried burned dog tags. 1 body arrived without a name. 3 graves had conflicting casualty reports between the 5th Infantry Division and attached armoured units. The paperwork sat inside a green metal crate under canvas. Rain leaked through one corner. The cemetery itself was never intended for civilians. Occupation orders during April 1945 treated local German gatherings near American dead as security risks. The concern was not symbolic. It was practical. Grave sites attracted crowds. Crowds attracted rumours. Rumours attracted violence. 2 days earlier, military police removed 17 civilians from another burial site near Bitburg after a drunken former party official shouted at American guards. So when Walker found the folded flag, procedure already existed. Confiscate the object. Question the civilian. File removal paperwork. Simple. But the problem was the flowers. The carnations were fresh. No market in Trier had reopened yet. Food ration lines already stretched 600 feet each morning near the railway station. Nobody wasted flowers in April 1945 Germany. Walker searched the fence line himself. He found footprints smaller than army boots, a heel mark near the drainage ditch, 1 empty tin can carrying rainwater beside cross number 4. The child returned before sunset. Not alone. An older woman walked beside her carrying a wooden bucket. The girl stopped at the center grave. She knelt beside the crosses. She cleaned mud from the marker boards using the edge of her sleeve. 1 MP started forward. Walker stopped him with one hand. Nobody spoke for almost 20 seconds. Then the girl reached inside her coat pocket. The MPs lifted their rifles. She removed a folded paper. Not propaganda, not a photograph, a burial list. 12 names written in uneven German spelling. Walker took the paper carefully. Each grave number matched correctly. Even the unidentified soldier. The paper included 1 sentence beside cross number 7. Mother in Ohio. Rain hit the wood markers. Walker folded the paper once. The next morning, he sent a report through the Trier Military Cemetery Command Office instead of filing immediate removal paperwork. The report included the flag, the burial list, and one unanswered question. How did a German child know the hometown of an unidentified American soldier? The report reached the first lieutenant before dawn. He read it beside a lantern inside the registration tent. 3 casualty forms sat open beside the folded German flag. The flowers had already begun to rot from the rain. He circled one sentence twice. Mother in, Ohio. The lieutenant ordered the civilian names checked against party records. Nothing. No Hitler Youth registration. No party office employment. No SS family connection. Only one detail appeared. The girl's father had died 14 months earlier during an Allied bombing raid near Koblenz. The report moved higher. Robert Miller, Philadelphia, age 42. He'd been a military police captain for 3 years. He'd seen black market ration deals, prisoner beatings, civilian riots, but he'd never seen this. Miller arrived at the cemetery at 0615. Fog still covered the lower rows. Water sat inside 5 helmet-shaped depressions near the fence. The carnations remained beside cross number 7. The girl was already there. She carried another bucket. No guard had permitted entry. Miller watched from 30 yards away while she cleaned dirt from the crosses one at a time. She stopped at the unidentified grave last. She stood there, longer than the others. Then she saluted, not correctly. Too slow. Hand too low. Civilian imitation. One MP muttered toward Miller. She could be performing for sympathy. Miller kept watching the girl. She removed something else from her coat pocket. A rusted American button. The back still carried mud. Miller asked where she found it. The interpreter spoke softly in German. The girl answered without looking away from the grave. Near the river, the Moselle crossing. 3 weeks earlier, 87 American infantrymen crossed under artillery fire near Trier while German positions collapsed along the eastern bank. Bodies drifted downstream for 2 days afterward. Local civilians saw the river before Graves' registration did. Miller looked again at the burial list. Cross number 7 no longer said unknown. Someone had penciled in a name overnight. Private Daniel Keene, Akron, Ohio, age 19. No official correction order existed yet. The identification had come from local civilians who recovered papers from the riverbank before American units secured the area. That created the real problem. Occupation policy demanded distance between German civilians and American dead. But the cemetery records now depended partly on German witnesses. 12 graves protected. One civilian removal order, waiting for signature. The captain did not sign it. Instead, he forwarded the entire file to Corps headquarters with one handwritten line attached. Civilian conduct inappropriate under occupation policy. Recommend command review before removal. The cemetery stayed open another night. By the next morning, it was sitting on Patton's desk. What Patton said next would appear in 2 separate graves registration reports before the end of April 1945. Patton read the burial list first. The paper stayed flat beneath one gloved hand. Rain stains covered the lower corner. The folded German flag sat beside the report inside the Jeep headquarters trailer. Nobody interrupted him. Outside, engines moved along the Trier road every few minutes. Mud covered the tires up to the wheel wells. A radio operator stood near the canvas entrance holding 2 unopened dispatches. Patton read the names twice. Private Daniel Keene, Akron, Ohio, age 19. He looked at the cemetery photograph next. 12 white crosses. One child beside the center row. Flowers dark from rainwater. The trailer stayed silent. Patton folded the photograph once. Then he looked toward the grave's registration captain. How old is the girl? 10. Sir, One sentence sat in the trailer after that. Rain struck the canvas roof. The MP officer spoke next. Occupation policy recommends removing civilians from burial sites near active troop movement. Patton said nothing. The officer continued. 3 sniper incidents were reported within 11 miles of Trier this week. Patton reached toward the folded flag. He turned it once in his hand, small enough to fit inside a coat pocket. Then he asked one more question. She knew the names. Yes. Sir. Silence again. The radio operator lowered his eyes towards the floorboards. Patton placed the flag back beside the burial list. She buried boys she was taught to hate. Nobody wrote for several seconds. The rain continued against the trailer roof. Then the grave's registration captain picked up his pencil. The MP officer closed the removal paperwork without signing it. The radio operator unfolded one dispatch but stopped reading halfway through the first sentence. Patton stood. 3 silver stars sat across the front of his helmet above the mud stains. His ivory-handled revolvers stayed untouched on his belt. He walked past the officers without another word. The folded flag remained beside the photograph after he left. The cemetery reopened at 0700 the next morning. No announcement was posted. No order appeared on the perimeter board. The MPs simply stopped turning civilians away from the outer fence. The girl returned before noon. Same brown coat, same bucket, different flowers, white this time. One American corporal watched her from beside the supply truck while Graves' registration workers replaced 2 damaged marker boards near the center row. Nobody spoke to her for almost 15 minutes. She moved from cross to cross slowly. Mud covered the hem of her coat. Rainwater dripped from both sleeves. She stopped at Private Daniel Keene's grave last again. An older sergeant beside the road removed his helmet. Another followed him 5 seconds later. Nobody ordered it. The cemetery stayed quiet except for truck engines moving west toward Luxembourg. Walker stood near the fence, holding the unsigned civilian removal form. The paper bent in the wind. He looked once towards the MP captain. The captain never reached for it. One medic walked into the cemetery carrying 12 fresh identification tags from Headquarters Corrections. He stopped beside cross number 7 and replaced the temporary marker himself. Private Daniel Keene, Akron, Ohio, 19 years old. The girl cleaned mud from the new lettering using 2 fingers. No one stopped her. A photographer from the Signal Corps arrived around 14:30. He raised the camera once. The MP captain lowered it with one hand. No pictures. The camera stayed down. The graves remained graves instead of propaganda. That mattered. By evening, 3 local civilians had quietly brought flowers to the outer fence line. None crossed inside. 2 American engineers repairing drainage trenches nearby shared cigarettes with an older German groundskeeper without speaking the same language. The folded German flag never appeared again. Walker later wrote that the girl probably understood the danger before anyone else did. A German flag beside American graves could have been mistaken for mockery, or politics, or provocation instead. It stayed folded beneath flowers. 12 grave markers remained untouched after inspection. The civilian removal order was never filed. 3 MPs reassigned to perimeter duty returned to standard patrol rotation within 24 hours. The cemetery stayed open until 11 bodies were transferred west in May 1945. Only 1 cross remained behind temporarily, Daniel Keene. The girl visited that grave for another 6 days. In May 1945, the temporary cemetery outside Trier was dismantled section by section. 11 American bodies moved west toward permanent military cemeteries in Luxembourg and Belgium. 1 transport truck broke an axle near Bitburg and arrived 9 hours late. Rain covered the convoy roads again before sunrise. Private Daniel Keene left last. Walker later wrote that the grave looked smaller once the other crosses disappeared. The flowers stopped appearing after the transfer convoy departed. Nobody ever recorded the girl's full name inside the official paperwork, but the one-line notation remained. Civilian child assisted burial maintenance voluntarily. That sentence survived in 2 separate graves registration files. Years later, one soldier still remembered the rain. James Walker survived the war. He went home to Cleveland, Ohio in 1946. In 1981, interviewed for a regional veterans archive in Pennsylvania, he said, "The mud kept sliding off the crosses because she wiped them every hour with her sleeve." Walker died in 1994 at age 80. His family donated his cemetery photographs and field notebooks to a local military history collection. Today, the temporary burial ground outside Trier no longer exists. If you visit the Luxembourg American Cemetery, you can still see sections where temporary battlefield graves from the Moselle fighting were reinterred after the war. Some original marker records remain preserved inside archival displays. In his diary, "War trains men to divide the dead. Dirt does not." No regulation inside the Third Army occupation manuals explained what to do with grief once the shooting stopped. Soldiers still feared sabotage. Civilians still feared occupation. Both sides carried reasons to distrust each other. But a child cleaning mud from 12 American graves complicated the paperwork. Would you have removed civilians from the cemetery or said what Patton said? Let us know in the comments. Temporary battlefield cemeteries appeared across the Third Army advance during spring 1945 because frontline movement often outpaced formal burial infrastructure. Near the Trier military cemetery zones, graves registration units sometimes relied on local civilians to identify river casualties recovered after Moselle crossings and bridge fighting. That cooperation created tension occupation manuals never fully solved. American forces needed information from civilians. At the same time, occupation policy discouraged emotional proximity between Germans and American dead. The contradiction rarely appeared in official summaries, but it existed in the field. If this story stayed with you, the full Patton playlist is linked below. Every episode goes deeper into the decisions that shaped the war. The next video covers 48 German bodies buried without identification tags inside a mass trench near Bavaria, after an American burial officer ordered the graves sealed before sunset.